In this video, I'm going to be introducing you to note values and note shapes. This is how you identify the rhythm of the music that you're playing. Remember, pitch or note names, the notes that you're playing are determined by the location on the staff, and then the note shape tells you how long or short to play the note or how to rest. Okay. Now, before we dive into what all this means, it's important to recognize the parts of a note. So the body of the note here is called the note head, okay, and it can be filled in or it can be empty. Many notes have this right here called the stem, and then on the stem you can have flags, and they can either be separate, like in these examples here, or they can be grouped together or barred together. Some common groupings are 2, 4, and also 3, which we're not going to talk about in this video. The great thing about note values is that it's just kind of like really simple math. Okay, so if you start up at the top with the whole note, if you split it in half, you get 2 half notes. If you split the half note in half, you get 2 quarter notes. If you split the quarter note in half, you get 2 eighth notes. If you split the 1/8 note in half, you get 2 16th notes. If you split 2 eighth notes in half, you get 4 16th notes. This chart right here shows how these all relate to each other, and also relate to beats or counts in your music. So this chart here is assuming that we're in 4/4, which means that there are 4 beats in a measure. Now, if you have a whole note here, which is just the note head by itself, empty, that means you hold it for 4 beats or 4 counts. You would sustain your note depending on what instrument you play. The half note here, where we add a stem, you sustain your note for 2 counts. The quarter note, with the stem filled in here, is a 1 count beat, kind of the building block of most common time or 4/4 music. For the eighth note gets half a beat, or you could think of it as 2 eighth notes fitting into 1 beat. 16th note gets a quarter of a beat, or if you think about it another way, 4 16th notes fit into 1 beat. Okay. Now the names here you probably noticed all relate back to the whole note. Whole being 1, and then a half, it's like fractions, a quarter, it's 1/4, an eighth note, 1/8, 16th note, etc. They do not relate to 1 beat. They relate to their beginning, or the kind of the top of the pyramid here, the whole note. Okay. Now rests are built and in much the same way. You have a whole rest, which is 4 beats, a half rest, which is 2, a quarter rest, which is 1, an eighth rest, which is half a beat, a 16th rest, which is a quarter of a beat. Okay. Now you'll notice here that whole rests and half rests do look similar. If you look at the whole rest, I like to think of it as like a hole in the ground, kind of sinks down. Whole rest, hole in the ground. The half rest to me looks like a hat. So just again some mnemonic devices to help you remember. Now if you look at the 8th rest and 16th rest, and if we were to progress on into 32nd rests and 64th rests, they, just like their note counterparts, have kind of a flag. So the 8th rest has one kind of a flag just like the 8th note does, and the 16th rest has 2 little flag attachments here just like the 16th note does. And I want to remind you one more time that these note shapes tell you how fast or slow to play your notes, how long to hold them, and don't relate really at all to the pitches that you're playing. So when you're reading your music, you need to look at 2 things: where the note is drawn on a line or a space, and what shape the note is, and that will give you just about all the information you need to know to play that note correctly.